What's up, everybody? Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com coming to you from Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. Day 5 of spring drills today. They were out here on the stadium live tackle, like 30 plays for the first, second, and third teams. So really cool to see all that kind of stuff. Now, we'll talk about that. Obviously, I want to go through things position by position, but this was the last practice before spring break. So they'll reconvene the weekend before they start on Tuesday, the 26th, and they'll go every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So, and Saturday practices will be open. Those will be scrimmages open to the fans and stuff. So that'll be really cool for everybody. Really appreciate them letting us watch 4 full practices in their entirety out here. So, and especially today, getting to see some live tackle stuff, because we haven't seen a whole lot of live tackle aside from like games and red-white game and stuff like that in the Sam Pittman regime. So it was cool to see that. I figured we just kind of go through things position by position. First of all, Taylon Green. I've been very impressed with what I've seen with him so far. I think they've maybe got a better situation at quarterback. The things that jump out to me when they talk about Taylon is, you know, just his leadership, how he interacts, how popular he is with everybody on the team. And, you know, I don't mean to make a dig at KJ or anything, but you kind of heard some things maybe last year that maybe that was a little bit different. Maybe he didn't have that same kind of interaction and stuff. So that is important to have from your quarterback. I always say, like, when I'm looking at a quarterback prospect, when they're like coming out of high school and they're just very stoic and they talk like this, like robo QB, that's not what you want in your quarterback. You want a guy with some personality, some guys that people can rally behind, and I kind of feel like maybe they have that in Taylon Green. So very good to see. Everything I've heard from reaching out to people, you know, people who knew him at Boise and all this stuff, just very good reviews from people on that. And we haven't talked to Taylon yet, so I'm real anxious to be able to do that. I assume we'll be able to talk to pretty much all the quarterbacks at some point here this spring. So yeah, he had a really nice throw. It was 61 yards over here in the corner of the end zone. He seems to like the left sideline for some reason, but it went to Isaiah Satania. Satania made a great catch and took it into the end zone. Again, this was a live tackle situation, but Taylon Green been very good so far, in my opinion. The guys up front for him blocking, you've got, to me, it's going to be a better offensive line. Now, how much better is it? I think that there were some problems with last year's team with just kind of how, you know, Cody Kennedy and Dan Enos and how those guys work together, and just, you know, maybe asking them to do too much. Obviously, they've upgraded on the offensive line. They've got a lot of guys that are a year older. Fernando Carmona, Keyshawn Blackstock are in the fold, and Addison Nichols at center. And then they're going to work to add a couple other guys. I've got them at 13 scholarship offensive linemen. That's just not enough. They need another tackle, another guard, and talk to Sam Pittman about that a little bit after practice. And, you know, that's kind of the same thing he feels. Tight end, I think, is a really interesting group. Now, Luke has rolled his ankle. He stepped on somebody today, so he wasn't able to go through everything, but just really pleased with the progression of Varkey's Gums. And I've said this before, a guy who had, 36 catches and 400 and something yards at North Texas should have had more production at Arkansas. I'm not saying he should have matched that, but he should have had more production. He was rolling with the first group, second group, a lot of 2 tight end stuff today, and really pleased to see him come along. He just looks so much more comfortable than he did throughout all of last year. Just more urgency and all that stuff. And speaking of urgency, we got to talk about Petrino today, because Petrino was getting after some people, like really more reminiscent of how I remember Bobby Petrino. And maybe it was the live tackle, maybe it's just the next progression, but it was no more Mr. Nice Guy today. I mean, he was getting after some people. Do your job, you know, just what you'd expect out of Bobby Petrino was a little bit more what you got today. And not just players, but getting after his coaches, wanting the tempo to be better, get lined up, you know, just getting after them. Just like you guys remember Bobby Petrino. And so that was cool to see, because, you know, a lot of the talk was just, well, he's calmed down, he's not the same guy, he's, you know, doing things a little bit differently. Oh, he's still Bobby Petrino. There's no question about that. He's still getting somebody's ass, I promise you. So, but again, I think part of that was just, you know, we're in day 5 now, and so they've been at it for a while, and they're full live tackle. And I think when you do that, it just kind of brings a little bit more intensity out of everybody. You know, they did some regular stuff, just moving the ball, and did some low red zone work. I thought the defense, we'll get to that. I just kind of want to go through position groups and stuff a little bit more with you. But I do think the offensive line is going to be better than it was a year ago. I just think they've got better personnel. I think that they're going to mesh a little bit better just based on people I've talked to, and that was obviously a problem last year. There just wasn't any chemistry between offensive line coach, offensive coordinator, and just kind of how the players started feeling about everything. And plus they were a lot younger. It's a different looking group out there, a little more boxy at the tackle versus, kind of long and slender like they were last year. I've mentioned on the last walk and talk I did, and I'm just doing these because, we've got basketball and, spring football. It's just kind of hard to get in a studio show. So I figured I'd just do these kind of things, and people seem to like them, obviously. So tight end, I mentioned Andreas Puska. It's Puska. I mentioned him and just how, he's a couple inches taller, 15 pounds heavier than any tight end they had last year. Arkansas's blocking tight ends, he's better than any of them were last year, and he's a better catcher than all of them. I'm not saying he's going to go downfield and catch stuff over his shoulder. I've seen him struggle a little bit in that area. But as far as like being a really punishing physical blocker and a guy that can catch the short stuff, I think he can do that. So I feel like they've got probably 4 tight ends that they can really count on. And it's good to see Shamar Easter out there. He's a guy that's going to be a lot bigger throughout his career, but probably playing behind some guys this year as he continues to realize his potential, because he's got a lot of it. But has Gums, Paskey, Ty Washington, when he gets back, he should be back out here after the break. But that's a nice looking group of tight ends, and an area that just really struggled overall last year, blocking. Young, Has was young. They got injured with Ty Washington and Has. And so, but I think it's a better group. Wide receiver, I think it's going to be hard to keep Davion Dozier off the field. He stood out to me at times, but these last couple of practices, he's just been so active. He had down there on the other end, right at the goal line, they're working red zone. They start off at the 19-yard line. Malachi Singleton, I believe it was with the third group, which Jacoby got some second group work today, but Malachi Singleton hits him right over the middle, and it's just like, it was all so quick but so athletic. I mean, and he's 6'4", he's rangy. He just looks the part of a guy that is going to be a stud for him one day. I think it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. So really like what I've seen for him. And, he had like 5 in the team period the other day. He had like 5 catches for 55 yards also. So he's been pretty active, made some spectacular catches. I mentioned Isaiah Satania, who Isaiah looks like he's, thickened up quite a bit from where he was last year and certainly the year before that. So he's got a little bit more weight on him, but made a nice grab. And Satania has done some good things. And Andrew Armstrong has just been steady Eddie. Tyrone Broden looks like he's gained a little bit more weight also. So, you've got the regular cast of characters out there at wide receiver that we've seen before, but you've also got Davion Dozier really starting to come on. C.J. Brown, for a freshman, has done some good things too. He might be behind some guys, obviously, but a guy that you look at and say, he's probably got a pretty good future. So just kind of to wrap all that up, yes, I think they're going to be better on offense than they were last year. First of all, they've got Bobby Petrino, who's a better offensive coordinator, better quarterback coach. I think Taylon Green is going to have a better year than KJ did last year. I just think he will. I think the players are going to – I just see a little bit different vibe with them also. Now, the question isn't how Arkansas is going to be compared to themselves next year. It's, again, like what I've said over and over again, how are they going to be compared to their peers in the SEC? How are they going to be against, Oklahoma State, what they've done in the offseason to develop their roster? Auburn, those are 2 big early games for them. So it's not just like, and when I talk like, hey, so-and-so's looking good or so-and-so's doing this and I really like what I'm seeing here, it's compared to last year for Arkansas. So I just want people to understand that. The big question is, how do they stack up against their peers? And that's obviously going to determine how far this team goes. Flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, I asked Sam Pittman about this also. They really need to add at least a couple more defensive linemen. I kind of thought at least a defensive tackle and a defensive end, but I think that they could do some things where they move some things around. And Pittman talked about maybe going to a little more odd front. I think they could slide Carson Dean down, who Dean has had a pretty good spring so far. He's certainly been more active with the first and second units than we've seen with him in the past, just a redshirt freshman. But he says they need 2 defensive tackle. And I'm kind of inclined to agree with him there, because once you get to the 5th defensive tackle, 6th defensive tackle, and I think Caleb James is going to be a good player. He's just a little bit light right now. You see him, anybody looks small standing next to Ian Gerford, who's 6'5", 380, but they're just a little bit light when you start getting to 5th, 6th defensive tackles, and they need some more big bodies in there. It's a hard position to recruit. Everybody wants those guys, but I think that you got, so first of all, Eric Gregory and Cam Ball are probably two of the more underrated players on this team. They're both very good defensive tackles. Ball, I think, has had a really good spring so far, and Gregory too. I mean, Gregory's a super senior, 6'4", 324, something like that. Just big, strong guy who's been around the block, and Cam Ball's getting to be like that too, with a lot of talent. Ian Gerford, I think, could be a guy that really takes the next step, maybe a surprise player type of guy this season. So I like where they are in the 2 deep there. It's just you'd like to be a little bit more veteran. And in the past, 5 years ago, 2018 or whatever, maybe that's fine. Maybe it's fine to have, a solid 2 deep and then rely on some younger, inexperienced players, maybe more developing players. But in this day and age, everybody else is able to go out in the transfer portal and recruit big-time players. So why wouldn't you do that also? And I've got them at 80 scholarship players. They've got room. Add a couple more offensive linemen, add a couple more defensive tackles, and switching over to linebacker, another area where they need another guy who's a little more veteran. They've got 9 scholarship linebackers, 7 of them, and when Bradley Shaw and Wyatt Simmons enroll, 7 of them are going to be first or second year players. So it's an incredibly young group. Xavier Sori's your veteran. Caden Henley is the other guy, and Caden hasn't played a snap at Arkansas, and he's a redshirt sophomore. So you're a little young, a little bit a youth at that position. So need to get a guy, and that's what the name I said to him is like, you need like an Antonio Greer. That's what I said to Sam in the press conference. He's like, yeah, exactly. Antonio Greer in 2021 had 85 tackles. He was all AAC for USF. Not like some superstar, former 5-star linebacker, and it's great to get those guys, but they need a guy that's veteran, just to boost that room a little bit, give them some pointers, if anything else. But yeah, somebody like that. And Greer had like 36 tackles for Arkansas last year, was banged up a good bit, but that's definitely what they need. That would fill the 5 spots. They're going to have a couple other guys hit the transfer portal. I think that's obvious. When the spring window opens, April 15th, they'll have some more guys hit the portal. But I've said this before, I really like Brad Spence. I think he's super explosive, muscled up, a guy that obviously loves the weight room, probably got some genetics involved in that too, but a guy that's really explosive. And then Xavier Sori, I thought today really moved well. There were times where he'd come across the field and make a play. Again, it's live tackle. Sam Pittman makes a great point. You're not going to know anything about your linebackers. You got a lot of questions about them. You're not going to know anything about those guys without doing live tackle stuff. Same with the running backs. And I thought overall, especially early in the scrimmage work, we saw a little bit better play from the linebackers and from the defense as far as the run game is concerned, versus what the offense was doing. Now, we saw some good stuff from the backs later on. I don't even think I talked about the running backs earlier. I may have to circle back. Jaquindon Jackson, I've said this before on the last Walk and Talk, just very tough, physical-looking runner. Braylon Russell, I think, is going to be a guy that's going to really help them also as a freshman. Isaiah Augusta, Dominic Johnson, we know that he can do some good things for him. Rashad DeBinion, who's lost a good bit of weight. So they've got a pretty good stable of backs. The thing that I wonder about with the skill spots is like, okay, I think they've got a good number of backs, some good experience and stuff. I feel like the same thing at wide receiver. Is there an NFL guy in this group? That's probably the question I would say, like, is there just a difference maker? Now, Andrew Armstrong is steady as they come at wide receiver. He'll catch 50 balls again if he stays healthy. He's a good player. And they've got some promising young guys. But, like, is there an NFL guy at wide receiver, at running back with this team? And I'm not so sure there is. I don't know. Sometimes, Jaquindon would probably be maybe the closest thing, just because we've seen him on the Power 5 level really produce what he did at Utah and whatnot. Everybody loves a freshman back like Braylon Russell, four-star recruit and stuff. But those would be the questions I have. I think, like, from a physical standpoint, like his tool set, like, Davion Dozier looks like he has that kind of potential, but again, he's just a redshirt freshman. So, all right, defense. We've gone over linebackers. We've gone over defensive line, defensive interior, edge. Edge, I kind of feel the same thing. Now, they can work Landon Jackson inside. They've done that a little bit. In third down situation, he goes 285, so it's not a big deal, 6'7", 285 to move him inside. Really like what I've seen out of Quincy Rhodes. I think Quincy Rhodes is a future starter, maybe the guy that comes in for Landon after he goes to the pros, which I think will happen after this year. And then, when you look to the future, they've got some talented guys, Kavion Henderson and Charlie Collins. They're just lighter. They're not. They're just not as big and experienced, obviously. So that's where you get, you start looking at those guys. You say, okay, that's my third group of defensive ends. I think they can be good players, and I think you're going to have to play those guys. You just like to feel really good about your two deep. And you get somebody banged up, then you start having to ask questions a little bit about are we fully where we need to be here at defensive end. They had more defensive linemen last year. I mean, they went out and got a lot of guys, a couple of defensive ends, a couple of defensive tackles out of the transfer portal. And I don't know that they're going to quite do that again. They got Anton Junkaj, but they haven't gotten a defensive tackle out of the portal. They need to get one or two, and they've done that like the last 3 years or so. They've gone out and gotten a couple more defensive tackles out of the transfer portal. So look for them to do that. Secondary, Jalen Braxton has done really well. He's had a couple interceptions the last couple of days, one today. I think they're in pretty good shape in the secondary. I really do. I mean, Jaden Johnson, if he improves just a little bit as he did from his sophomore year to, or I guess from his sophomore year to his junior year, is he a senior already? That's wild. So if he improves just a little bit as he did, improving tremendously last year, I don't even know what I'm trying to say there, but he improved a lot last year. Okay, we all saw that. If he can do that a little bit more, then I think Arkansas got a really good player there. Hudson Clark has been pretty steady for them. He's not a superstar, but he's a steady player. He catches a lot more flack than he deserves, I'll say that. And, Jalen Braxton, Jaheim Singletary's done some good things. Saw him make a nice tackle today, but he's a big cornerback. What people tell me about him is the focus is different with him, like his attitude, his focus, and that's something that we talked about with Jaden Johnson from his sophomore to his junior year. So maybe that's a similar thing going on with Jaheim Singletary. And then you start looking at, Snacks Johnson. Snacks Johnson, maybe not these last couple of days, but like the first 2 days that were open to us, it felt like the whole time I was out there, all I heard was Snacks, 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 making one play after another, encouraging people, leading, which you'd like to see from one of your veteran players. So, but maybe I haven't seen his, heard his name as often as I did those first two practices. But, obviously what you got in Snacks Johnson. Danico Slaughter, I think, can be a good player for him. Like what I see out of both Metcalfs, TJ and Tevis. Metcalf, the true freshman. Miguel Mitchell working in there. They got pretty much, aside from Nudie, they pretty much got their secondary back from last year. And Al Walcott also, who was one of their probably 3 rotational safeties. I think they'll probably, you look at Miguel or maybe Danico Slaughter is a guy that kind of fits in all those spots. We've seen Slaughter work at defensive, at the nickel, which they call hog. We've seen him work at safety. So maybe he's the guy that kind of rotates around to different spots, kind of like what we saw early, at least with Hudson Clark, before he kind of solidified his role in there. It's going to be tough to replace Cam Little. They've got a pretty accurate guy, though, in Matthew Shipley. And it's good to see Vito Calvaruso out here again in a Razorback uniform like he's supposed to have on after transferring briefly to Wisconsin back 2 years later. I think he'll probably be your kickoff man. I don't know about field goals. He just kicks the hell out of the ball, but you just don't ever know where it's going to go. So anyway, spring break coming up. Basketball game at 3. March Madness. Transfer portal coming soon after that. A lot of activity. So go check out HawgSports. It's 50% off right now. HAWGsports.com. Yeah, we just did a few laps. Maybe I got my steps in today. Getting close on it. All right, everybody. 10 more practices to go. Reconvening. And then starting again on Tuesday, March 26th. Saturday practices are open. I promise you, if you come out here and you watch him practice, you're gonna like your, what you see. Using a lot of the field on offense, deep balls, screens, intermediate throws, over the middle, to the sideline, the whole tree. So that's what you can expect, obviously, with the Bobby Petrino offense. All right, everybody, thanks for joining me. 20 minutes walk and talk, that's a record. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, and we'll catch you next time.